one of the things about David, as you may not know, is he grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. And he is a big fan of Philadelphia sports teams, and you will see the Philadelphia 76ers mentioned in this book. So he may have some comments if you ask him about the third ring of March Madness. The other thing that you should know is that he is currently the policy and advocacy leader for the Chan Zuckerberg Institute. So he has an insight on philanthropy. He has an insight in terms of, obviously, Facebook and its activities. And so he is uniquely, I think, qualified to give a brilliant insights on a variety of subjects. One other thing you might be interested to know about David is that he went to the University of Delaware. But he left to work on political campaigns. So he left, I believe, in 1988, and he got his degree in 2010. So for those of you still working on your degree, follow David's example and don't give up. But ladies and gentlemen, let's give a wonderful Philadelphia welcome to David Plouffe.
Well, hey, everybody. Morris, thank you for that overly kind introduction. It's great to be back in Pennsylvania. I'll start by, well, first of all, I have the pleasure, oh, look at this. I have my 15-year-old son who's here from California, and my 2 siblings in from Delaware, so give them a round of applause. It's nice to have them. Front and center. Yeah, so I grew up not too far from here, so it's always great to be back in the Delaware Valley, but also great to be back in Pennsylvania, a place where so many of you I know in this room helped Barack Obama win this state twice, so thank you for that. And so many of you worked so hard to have such an amazing blue night in November of 2018, so thank you for that. And the title of my book is Not Subtle, Citizen's Guide to Beating Donald Trump. And you folks here in Pennsylvania obviously couldn't be more core to that mission. So I'll talk a little bit about the book. I know that you all have a lot of thoughts, so I want to leave plenty of time for questions. We have a big primary night tonight. We have another one next Tuesday. We obviously have a general election looming, so I know everyone's got a lot of good thoughts and questions on that. But the real premise for my book was I just kept hearing from so many people, even after our really awesome 2018, in most parts of the country, not all. People were focused on the main event to come, and I kept hearing from people, friends of mine, family members, well, what can I do? What else can I do? And I thought, you know, maybe I'll put some thought into that. And the truth is, there's lots of great organizers in this room who probably can do as good a job of mine, if not better, about capturing all the different things you can do in a campaign. But I thought, having run presidential campaigns, it would be great from my perspective to really emphasize how critical your involvement is. Because I think sometimes we think it's the latest ad or the debate answer, right, or the interview. And at the end of the day, you win or lose presidential elections, particularly close ones like the last one was, by all of you and your friends and brothers and sisters in Wisconsin and Michigan and Arizona and North Carolina and Florida, reaching out to people. And even in a very closely divided country, and we clearly are, one thing I reflect on, you know, I know growing up you learned about landslide elections. Well, 1974 was the most famous one after Watergate, and then we saw the 94 one, and they were big deals because they didn't happen very often. But then we see, you know, pretty much a Republican landslide in 2002. We see Democratic landslides in 06 and 08, Republican landslide in 10, Republican landslide in 14, Democratic landslide in 18. And what's pretty clear is there's more volatility in the electorate than I think sometimes we understand. And sometimes that's because one party's super motivated and the other party's kind of down, and you get advantaged by that. But it also means there's a lot of voters out here, including here in Pennsylvania, that bounce around from election to election. And so one of the things I really spend time talking about in the book is when you think about your activity in this next election, whether it's on your phone, at doors, writing postcards, just making sure the 50 or 100 people you have some influence over in your life are registered, they've got their own plan. Just remember how we win. So let's talk about Pennsylvania. To win the presidency against Donald Trump, who for all of his buffoonery and his misogyny and his racism is going to be really hard to beat. for a few reasons. One, he's an incumbent. Incumbents have massive advantages. I've been there. It's much easier to win when you have all the weaponry and you're ready for the battle. And they are ready for this battle. Trump has all the money he'll ever need. He's got help from foreign governments. He obviously, there is no low they won't go to. Lie, distortion, we see it every day. That's not the Russians, by the way. That's him and his campaign. And you guys probably know this as well as I do. They're registering and finding a lot of people in Pennsylvania who aren't swing voters in Montgomery County necessarily, but they are outside of Pittsburgh. They're in Northampton. So he's not shown much interest, quite frankly, or ability to grow his base traditionally, people who might have been voted against him. He's going to do what George Bush did in 2004 in Ohio, which is find every conservative voter, every person that looks like his MAGA base, and we're going to be blown away by the turnout. So if you think Trump's going to get 10 votes, you better assume he's going to get 12. You know, there was a poll this week that showed, and again, I hate to even quote polls because they're kind of silly and wrong, but I'll do it anyway. It showed, you know, Biden, Trump, I think nationally 51-42. It showed Sanders, Trump 49-44. But amongst those who felt most intensely about the election, Trump was up 15. So I talked to a lot of Democrats. I've seen a lot of Democrats on this book tour. People are pretty fired up about this election. His folks are even more fired up. They're not going to give this up easily. So despite that, you know, I'd still rather be us than them because I think we've got numbers on our side in terms of the amount of people we need to beat him. But when you look at if Trump's going to really increase his vote share here in Pennsylvania, not through persuasion, but through just raw registration and turnout, what do we have to do? So, you know, we obviously, Hillary Clinton actually did pretty well in turnout in Philadelphia here, but we're going to have to do better, a lot better. We're going to have to stretch what we all think is humanly possible. You know, we got to do better in Bucks County than we did. We won by 2 or 3 points. We got to do better there. We've got to win by more margin and more turnout in Montgomery and Delaware. As you guys know, Donald Trump actually won Northampton County. He won Erie County. Erie County was almost a 20-point swing from Obama to Trump. So we got to maximize turnout here in Philadelphia, and we were in Pittsburgh yesterday, Pittsburgh, like big time. And we obviously need to maximize our suburban vote share and turnout big time. I don't want to offer specific numbers here, but you know, we're talking 6 figures, not like a little bit here or there. Have to do that. And obviously that's hard because to Drew turnout, you know, those are people who aren't interested in politics, who might not think it matters. They might even like Trump, but they're like, what's the point? So you know how hard that is. And honestly, our nominee could give the best debate performance in human history and have the best advertisement in human history. And the reason that person's going to vote is some of you has the right conversation with them. Like, that's the key to this. And we still have to do better job of, if you look in some of the counties between Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania and all around Pittsburgh, some of Trump's margins were 15, 20, 25, even 30 points better than Mitt Romney. So we're not going to get those back, but we got to claw back some of that. So the message of the book is, it's all those things. There's a very unhealthy debate in our party sometimes about, we can just win if we motivate our base and turn them out, or we just have to win the persuasion game. I don't actually even have an opinion on that. I just see the simple math. To get to a win number in a state like Pennsylvania, you got to do enough of all that. And so many of you worked hard in politics. So my book, I hope it doesn't annoy you that have been in politics, because I hope there's still an idea or 2 or 3 that maybe you'll decide to focus on. But I really wanted to make sure people who've never been in politics, or maybe gave of their financially but never gave time, understood this. The most important thing, I think, is before you decide to go out canvassing or make phone calls or write postcards or engage in social media back and forth, you just have to understand it's going to seem small, it can be frustrating, and you wonder, does it matter? But let's just do some simple math. So, you know, let's say here in Pennsylvania, September and October, one of you, hopefully all of you, go out for a 4-hour canvassing trip. And your job is to actually talk to currently registered voters who the campaign doesn't think are any threat to vote for Trump but may not vote, turnout targets. And, you know, most people aren't home, people don't want to talk to you, people say, I already told someone else I'm going to vote, you know, I'm hurry, I'm on the phone, you can't talk to me. And at the end of that long shift, you maybe talk to 2 people. You say, I've recorded that, and I think I had good conversations with them, and I think they're more likely to vote. And you might say, what the hell does that matter? 2 people in a big state like Pennsylvania? But if 8,000 other people throughout the state, and there better be 8,000 people in early September and that Saturday doing that, that's 16,000. The next Sunday, another 8,000 people having similar results, that's 32,000. And then you think about what that means, that's almost 250,000 people. And let's say half of them don't follow through on what they told us, half. That'd be a big flake rate. That's still way more than enough vote than we need to win this state, no matter what Donald Trump does. So I want you to really think about your effort in the aggregate and almost put blinders on and be like, I know it's not gonna seem like I hit a home run today. It's gonna be tough sledding, but it's what we have to do. Because they have much more power on their side. They have Fox, and they have Sinclair. They have digital properties that are sprouting out every day in this state. You know, some of the biggest advertisers on Facebook and Instagram now are publications you've never heard of that have only been around for 6 months. They're conservative publications, most of it fake news, some of it real news. They've just got a machine, and their turnout comes easier. So that's what we all have to do. And as bad as we all felt the night of, I guess it was probably, what, 1:30 or 2 Eastern time, November 9th, 2016? I just want you to keep in mind 2 alternative scenarios to really keep you motivated and focused. So let's say it's about the same. This time it's 1:30 Eastern, November 4th, 2020. First scenario, Florida's loudest, dumbest, and most toxic new resident strides across the Mar-a-Lago ballroom with his grifter kids and Sean Hannity in tow and says, "Thank you, America, for giving me a second term." Okay? I want you to keep that in mind. To me, that will feel, if possible, 50 times worse than the first time. Because what that means is he was ratified. I'll come back to that in a minute. The other alternative is he doesn't come out on the stage at all because he's sulking in his, suite or his gold-plated bathroom. Or he comes out with his grifter family, and my guess is Sean Hannity will have cut him loose at that point, and say, vote fraud, it was fake news, election was stolen, I called Joe Biden. Okay? So either way, he doesn't show up or he concedes. Like one of the most, for me, best memories of our lifetime will be seeing that, okay? So, and my message to you is, you have a special responsibility because you're here. So if Trump wins a second term, you guys all more persuasively than I can talk about what that means. Climate, democratic institutions, 2 more Brett Kavanaughs, millions of people not getting health care, many of them dying, an economy that's completely wrecked from a deficit standpoint and geared towards the wealthy, all the things that will be hard enough for us to recover. The more I reflect on this, though, one of the most important reasons to beat him is if he wins, if Donald Trump is ratified, there will be a generation of mostly male politicians in this country and every Western democracy who thinks this is the way to run and win and govern. And we won't recover from that. We won't kill Trumpism by beating Trump, but it's the best thing we can do to make sure it's on its last life. So that's what to keep in mind. And your guys' role here couldn't be more important because there is no route to the presidency, none in my view, that doesn't involve winning this state in Michigan. It is the predicate for beating him. And I know that's a lot of pressure. There isn't a we're going to win Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina and lose this state in Michigan. Doesn't exist. You guys have to get these 20 electoral votes back. And Michigan's got to get their 16 back. Now, that puts us at 268. We're not all the way there. So that means our brothers and sisters in Arizona, North Carolina, and Florida, and maybe Georgia, one of them, and Wisconsin, has to answer the call. But we have to get this state, have to put us on the doorstep. And I think that, I hope we have an awesome nominee and an awesome campaign, and Trump runs a bad campaign. Part of the message of the book, none of that really matters. What can you do? I often put it in this, I live in California now, in San Francisco. When I talk to people, almost none of them from politics, but most of them progressive, what can I do? And if there's somebody who might have the time or means to go to Arizona, I always say, well, you're going to Arizona, right? I'll often say, I don't know. I don't really door knocking, calling. I don't know, I'm going to give. I kind of say you deserve Trump if you can't take 2 days to go to Arizona. And so for all of you here, it's what What can you do? And I think there's a special opportunity here where maybe you haven't been a precinct captain or a volunteer leader before, and you decide, I'm going to take more of a leadership role. And I know that's unfair, because that means you guys basically have most of the country counting on you, most of the world counting on you, and that's a lot of pressure. But I would embrace that, right? Or maybe you can't be a formal precinct leader, but you can do 8 hours a month instead of 4. Or maybe you've never actually talked to the 100 people who are friends and family members in a really methodical way. Like, make sure they're registered. They moved. Are they registered at the right place? You have this amazing new opportunity in Pennsylvania to vote early by mail. Make sure everybody's doing that. And then make sure everybody's got their own plan for involvement. What are you going to do in the general election? And I would begin to think about that now. The time you can give, content, when I say content, it's not like a Hollywood studio. We all have an ability to really be effective by either sharing content, videos, infographics that we see, or creating our own. Well, how would I create my own content? Best example. Let's say you know someone up in Northampton who voted for Trump last time, who's not going to do it this time. Say, do you mind if I take a 15-second video of you with my phone and tell me why? And post that. Here's all the goodness that comes from that. People in your feed will see that on the social platform you use. They'll share it. Other people will see you doing it and say, I'm going to do that too. I have a friend like that. And in today's world, a group, maybe Michael Bloomberg, who's got plenty of money to spend, his people will see that and say, maybe, do you mind if we go put $1 million behind that, and we're going to run an ad on that? So you have the power to be such a powerful storyteller. I hope you fight back at all the lies and misinformation. By the way, just before I came out here, this isn't all Russia. You know what Donald Trump just tweeted? He said, basically, Americans are going to be really upset to know the Democrats want to get rid of the car, and will make sure that no family can have more than one car. It's a complete lie. But people will believe this. I've seen research lately in this state, in Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, where voters who are conflicted say they're open, meaning I have problems with Trump, I don't know if I'm going to vote for Trump, say, but I don't know if I can do the Democrats because I'm not going to be able to get steak if they win. Okay? This stuff matters on the edges. So if you see something like that, don't assume no one will believe it. I hope the campaign makes it easy, so in 2 seconds they have an app where you can fire back some content that pushes back, but take 5 seconds to Google if you don't say, that's a lie, right? And again, maybe your Uncle Jared or Aunt Ivanka won't believe it, but somebody might, or somebody will see you fighting back. But the other thing is, again, to the positive content, I know I made this mistake. I'm not sure on Twitter or Facebook I spent any energy on Hillary Clinton's plans. It was all anti-Trump stuff. And I tell you, particularly in a scenario, and I would argue either of our nominees, but let's just talk about Biden, I think it's really incumbent on us, if we see something that excites us, maybe it's a speech he gives where he talks about, I'm getting back in the Paris Climate Accords, and this is what that means. If there's 15 seconds of that, send that out to your friends and say, this is why I'm working so hard. If you're volunteering and you have a great moment where you actually register someone to vote, take a quick video of that, put it on Instagram. Like, we have to infuse energy in this. And, we can't just complain when we're not seeing it at the top. I hope we do. Like, we have to, and that last part's super important. It just can't be fighting back against the nonsense, as important that is. We have to use our weaponry. And I get questions all the time. Well, I got rid of my Facebook account or my Instagram account. I can't stand it. I get it. But you need to get it back on, and then you can turn it off on November 4th, okay? But this is the central front. And Trump understands this so well. He is a marketer, and he understands how to communicate in today's day and age. He thinks images, GIFs, memes, like the attack on General Soleimani, you remember a few months ago. Our commander-in-chief's first response was not a speech from the Oval Office or the East Room. It wasn't even a White House statement. He tweeted out a picture of the American flag with no words. And by the way, some people mocked him. It's brilliant, okay? Whether we like it or not, you have to think image first when you're communicating, right? Words still matter, but we all have an ability to capture what excites us, the stakes of this election. And that's the other thing I mentioned, I talk about this in the book, is I think there's 2 important things to keep in mind as you're talking to voters. And remember, anybody that we're talking about here, a swing voter, somebody who might not register or turn out, somebody who might be thinking about third party, they are somewhat apathetic. They're not political creatures. You got to meet them where they are. We're going to win this election with people who aren't voting for our nominee and they have bumper stickers on their car or truck or wearing a pin. They're going to do it somewhat reluctantly. But that vote counts the same in a tally as any of ours does. And I think sometimes, and I've made this mistake, we don't meet voters where they are. It's where we want them to be. So yes, we want people to be lifelong citizens. We want people to think our nominee is going to be on Mount Rushmore. We want them to, no, they are not going to want to have that conversation. The most important thing we can do is listen. Well, tell me what's important to you. Because usually then you find an opening. And if it's somebody who says, listen, I think they're all corrupt, and I'm not sure that, if it's Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders, they're not going to do anything good. Rather than trying to convince them otherwise, I'd probably say, yeah, they're not going to be on Mount Rushmore. And they're not going to get as much done as we'd like. But here's what they are going to do. You care about climate, they'll get back in Paris. And they're going to make it harder for coal plants to pollute. You care about health care, they're going to fight every day to get more people more affordable health care. I hope they're successful. But we have to focus the mind, okay? But also be okay with, just for a moment, lowering the sights a little bit to get these voters. And I think we also have to make sure we're painting the picture for everybody, for us, so we're properly motivated. This isn't simply a question of, does Donald Trump get a second term or not? Does he win re-election? We really want people to think about, this is 8 years of Donald Trump. We actually have one of our oldest brother, Trump voter, and what he'll say is, and I think he's happy he voted for Trump. But he's like, I'm not sure I want the guy around for 8 years. So if there's something he can live with, he'll vote for it. There's a ton of people out there like that. And that sounds like, what's the distinction there? It's this is 8 years. We see with the way he's mishandling the crisis, that should make the argument easier. But I do think for some voters, it's when I say voters, not any of us, swing voters. When you talk to them and you say, well, everything he's doing, basically pushing the boundaries of law and norms and behavior, attacking everybody. He's doing all that before he has to greet the voters and ask them for a second term to get rehired. What's it going to be like if he gets through that gate? There is nothing to stop him. And, we're surrounded by history in this building. You only have to be a casual student of it to realize the line between democracy and autocracy is thinner than we'd like. And also realize that forms of government and empires never last forever. That sounds dramatic. But we see, when he jokes about 10 years and 15 years and 20 years, I'm not sure it's much of a joke. And that's why I think this election is probably the most important one in our country since 1860. So I hope the book is useful to you. Again, the spirit of it to me is more important than the specifics, which is we all have to take some ownership for this election and really make our own plan of action and just know that it matters, even on days when it seems like it doesn't. Even when it's I'm not sure I made any effect today. You almost have to be like, whatever, I'm doing the same thing tomorrow. We just have to stay at it. Because I think that, you think about what this country will look like January 2025 if this guy's in power for 4 more years. And, we see with what's happening in the last few days in particular, he's very transparent about this, so it shouldn't surprise us, but it's still shocking for me to see it in full relief. He's got to be one of the biggest narcissists in the history of the human world because you see the way he's acting, the way he looks physically, which is the worst he's looked. It's not because he's concerned about any of our physical health or, quite frankly, even the economic health of the country. He's worried about his political health. And I will tell you, Nixon even, certainly Bush, Reagan, Eisenhower, Obama, Clinton, the executive branch is the one place where when a crisis happens, you can't worry about positioning or even your party. You just have to try and do what's best for the country. And historically, our presidents have done that, some better than others. He's the first one who looks at everything, even something like this that I hope it doesn't, could send us into recession. I hope it doesn't, but could harm a lot of our citizens through the prism of his own political, okay? Some of the tweets he sent out over the last 72 hours, they'll be talking about them 100 years from now because they are so outrageous and so beyond anything we've ever seen in executive branch. So that's the other reason we have to beat this guy. It's not even about issue differences. It's he's probably thinks he's keeping it in check. He probably thinks because he has a re-election, he's being careful. Like, I'm not even sure he'll care about managing crisis in the second term. And the self-dealing and the grifting it's all be about how do I set me and my family up for the best exit velocity and strategy when I leave. So you guys are sort of called to history here. And, all of us outside of your state and other battleground states will do everything we can to help you. But you have, I think, a special responsibility. And I've seen what you've done here for Barack Obama. I saw what you did here in 2018. So it's not like we're talking about going from 0 to 100. It's just what kind of extra effort can we all put in to really make sure that if each of you in this room, and you're joined by only a few thousand others, think about that. Convince 5 or 6 people to vote that wouldn't vote, or convince a swing voter to lean our way who wasn't, or convince someone not to vote third party but vote for us. We win Pennsylvania. Because no matter what happens, with all of Trump's considerable strengths electorally, he does have a pretty hard ceiling. He's not going to win a state like this, or Michigan, or even Wisconsin, by much, okay? So it's not like he's going to escape us. We've got him in our sights. I think we can produce the kind of numbers we need to, but it is going to take all of us doing it. And I know that can sound trite, but I think that's the only way we're going to win. Because the people ultimately in the last few weeks here in Pennsylvania are going to be someone who's like, not going to vote third party, don't like either of them. And you have to treat that as like the most serious conversation you've had since your proposal to your spouse. Treat it that fragilely, seriously. Like, we just have to, and again, my encouragement would be, let's always start by listening. First thing all of us coming out of this primary need to do, particularly if you're on the winning side of the primary. If you know people who were organizing and active for the loser or the losers, have them over to your house. Let them complain about what happened and they're upset, and listen, and then say, you know what, we need you. So let's say Biden does win. Clearly Biden doesn't know the first thing about getting support from young people. So the Sanders people do. We need them. He ought to hire a bunch of his staff. I went through this in the Obama-Clinton race, and I certainly did some things wrong because you're in such a hurry. But you have to understand that people feel strongly, right? And I think if we lose to Trump, the first reason won't be that we didn't quote-unquote unify enough, but it is such a predicate if that foundation is weak. So we all have a role to play there. It's to listen to people who are upset and not say, come on, get on board. They need a little time. We need to listen to them and just let them know. I was in this event in North Carolina a couple days ago, and a gentleman who had kind of jumped me when I came in, so I knew where he was going to go, just said, I'm neutral in the primary. I voted in California, but I have to be neutral. And he said, you've been fair to Bernie, but, Bernie's FDR and Biden's not, and I'm not going to vote for Biden. No one I know is going to vote for Biden. So we had a discussion. I just ended up by saying, I think Everett can attest to this. I said, all I'm going to say to you, sir, is if Bernie Sanders ends up being the nominee, I'll work harder for him than I did for Barack Obama. And all I know is we need you, because if not, Trump's going to get a second term. So he's not ready, but I think it made a difference, right? So we just have to know that. But the most important actors on something like that, unifying the party, the most important actors, I think, in terms of getting to a win number here in Pennsylvania, really isn't the national campaign. It's you. Now, it's odd that the national campaign may be headquartered here in Philadelphia, which is awful nice, but Biden's campaign, if he ends up being the nominee. But you just are. Because I think that people get very skeptical of propaganda, and the more we all spend behind our devices, and it's important that we wage the digital war as well, so I'm not suggesting you don't, but if you have a chance to talk to a human being, take advantage of it. Because that connection, if on election day, somebody who didn't vote early here in Philadelphia is busy and something comes up that may complicate their ability to vote, and they made a commitment to one of you at the door that weekend, when they're thinking about, are they going to try and make the adjustment to actually go vote, I guarantee they're not going to be thinking about our nominee. They might even not thinking about Trump. They're going to be thinking about you, the human being who they last talked to about this election. And just don't underestimate the power of that. And also just think about how awesome it's going to be to see that racist, misogynist criminal out as a disgraced one-term incumbent. And you guys can make it happen. So
you talk a lot about door-to-door campaign.
Right.
Tonight you were talking about more about talking to your friends. But the door-to-door campaigning, is that obsoleted by the virus?
Well, we'll have to see. So, we just saw Biden and Sanders both pull down their rallies tonight. It was just announced that the Arizona debate on Sunday between Biden and Sanders is going to go on, but it's going to be in a studio with no audience. So there's going to be changes, right? May get to the point where the campaigns are like, yeah, we're going to do phone calls and we're going to do postcards and we're going to do social media. So it's not an excuse not to do anything. The odds are, I'm not a doctor, but over the 7-month period, there's going to be windows where it's going to be fine to be doing door knocking. Obviously, you shouldn't do anything you're not comfortable with yourself. So we'll just have to monitor the situation. But there's lots of different ways to reach voters. I do believe that looking somebody in the eye is the best way. But if there's a period of time where that's not something medical professionals are suggesting, we're just going to have to adjust. So it's a great question. We'll see. Fast-moving situation. And I think it was good the two candidates took. By the way, Donald Trump said he's going to keep doing his rallies. Because, of course, we should just keep calm. It's all going to go away in 2 weeks.
If Sanders is not the nominee, how do you get him to really support the nominee? I blame him for Trump.
Well, here's what I would say. I think it's fair to say that Bernie Sanders, endorsed Hillary, campaigned for him, but maybe not with the gusto you would have liked. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but I talked to his campaign. I have a real sense. Biden and Sanders actually have a good personal relationship, and Trump's looming. Okay, so I think Bernie Sanders is going to campaign his heart out. My point is, even if he does that, some of his people are going to be like, Bernie's kind of got to do that. He's a politician. So if you know somebody like that, it's not all just going to happen magically. He'll do that. And I'll tell you, something I'm excited about the last few days, even though a lot of these people did not succeed in the presidential campaign, it's made me excited when you see Beto out there and Klobuchar and Kamala and Booker. And I'm not saying that because they're for Biden. I'm just saying they're important voices, and they're new voices, and it's great to see them out there. And I've always learned, quite frankly, politicians are more effective when they're campaigning for somebody else. It's more complicated when you're campaigning for yourself. So I'm excited. I think we're going to have a good team out there. I think he won't be the problem. I really don't think it. But I think some of his people who support him feel really strongly about this, and we should not diminish that. We should respect where they're coming from, try and understand it, and then try and find a way to get them involved. But I think he'll be out there. And, we'll see. You will know in 4 or 5 hours where the race stands after tonight. But this could be by next Wednesday, March 18th, after the big 4 states next week, Florida, Arizona, Illinois, and Idaho. I mean, the delegate picture is probably going to be pretty clear. So, and by the way, some people are suggesting, well, if Biden's going to win, why do we have to go through this debate? He needs to do this debate. He needs to show all of us he can handle Bernie Sanders. Because if he can't handle Bernie Sanders, okay? So, and people forget, and I helped him prepare for these debates, and that's not why he was good. I'm just saying he was always good at debating. 12 with Ryan, high stakes debate, did really well. 8 with Palin, funky debate, did really well. He's always been a good debater. So if anything concerns me, the delta on the debate performance, it wasn't like this is an event in the political decathlon he stunk at and he still stinks at it. He was quite good at it. So I want this debate to happen. And it's going to happen. So the only way it wouldn't happen is if Bernie just decides there's no way I can make it up and I'll just get out now. But, I assume he wants to have the one-on-one debate. I think it's good for our party to see how either of these guys handle a one-on-one, which is a completely different event than when you've got 12 or 5 people. You really got to be on your game.
Thank you. Would you reflect on the role of Fox in the 2 Obama elections, the 2016, and what you think it will be in the 2020 election?
It's gotten more powerful, not because, so you got to understand, like, a great night for Fox, even for like Hannity, is still like 3.5 million people, which in this big country is not a lot. The problem is that content gets distributed by citizens, but also they are much more command and control. So talk radio is doing that the next morning. They're using the same language, pushing the same thing. Breitbart and other online outlets do it. Outside actors outside of this country even see what they're doing. So the initial audience is not something I'd worry about, but it gets quite large. And we see that in Democrats are more than 2 to 1 more likely now to think the coronavirus is a serious thing because Fox is parroting Trump, with the strange exception of Tucker Carlson, I guess, who went on a rant last night kind of taking Trump to task. So, so it's a problem for the country because it is alternative reality. And this is the first time in Trump's presidency really where he's not going to be able to get away with that. Because I hope this doesn't happen, but if people are losing jobs and the economy does get worse and a lot of people are getting ill, people we know, like that's just not made up hoax stuff, right? So, and I think he'll pay a price for that because at the very least what people expect is right, left, center, good president, bad president. When bad stuff happens, you're going to be on it. And, I see research now with swing voters who are like, this guy's a clown show right now, right? That's not a partisan thing. He just doesn't look like he's on it. So Fox is dangerous. It's bad for the country, which is probably more important than politics, but we don't have that. The right says, well, we have to have that because you have the news media. I mean, listen, the news media doesn't take it easy on Democrats, okay? They just don't, and they certainly don't sing off the same hymnal. And so that's the power of it. And Trump knows that. I mean, he calls the plays, and folks salute. But there's an interesting. I went on Fox and Friends last night. So in the spirit of us all getting out of our comfort zone in this election, talk a little bit about the book, but it was more just general. And I kind of I accused him of being Trump's Pravda and like his alternative reality, and that's why people have to. And they got really upset. And it just shows me they are such little thin-skinned bullies. And I know. None of us like for Democrats to go on Fox, in a way, you're aiding and abetting, racism and misogyny, but I think we have to go on that network because there are some people who are open that listen to it. The other thing to get into psyops warfare, it drives Trump crazy. I mean, he's seen some nameless Democrat crowd on there hold Trump about it because he sees it as his network. It's his happy place. And so, honestly, I love Biden and Sanders. I know they've done town halls. I'd go on Fox and Friends. I'd just get in his grill and destabilize the guy. And what's the value of that? Because when the leader of an organization is destabilized, they don't execute as well. So he's, like a 4-year-old in that way. You can predict the reaction. But it's a big problem. And at some point, we need to figure out what are we going to do about this. So like Bloomberg may be a somewhat solution in this election. But that's just feeding advertising and boosting news through November 3rd, and then it goes away. So they have it all the time. They have it all the time, and we have nothing like that.
For a moment, let's assume Biden has won the nomination and you're the campaign manager. Who is the vice presidential candidate who you think would most help?
I wonder when we were getting to this. So I could actually spend 30 minutes on this, so I won't. So first of all, it is the most important and personal decision a presidential nominee makes. So people like me, they're happy to hear our advice, but they got all the voting shares because they have to live with this person. So first thing is 90% of this should not be about the campaign. It should be about if I win, because this is not a warm bucket of spit job anymore. Is this somebody that I can trust to execute, work with Congress, work with foreign leaders, give me good counsel, be honest. Secondly, given the age of both Biden and his opponent, threshold question, have to be somebody where every American, including us, say, that person can definitely do the job. So even Trump, the only thing I'll give him, I won't even give him credit for it, but he didn't pick Pence because Pence was some awesome political figure. He also needed to pick some boring white dude to say, even though I'm Trump, I got a guy who can handle things if something happens to me. So that's baseline. And I'd say, so let's think about a swing voter up outside of Scranton or in the western part of the state. They will not be influenced by our pick. You never get vote with your pick. There's even political science today that suggests that the LBJ effect in Texas is overstated. But it can help with enthusiasm with volunteers. So this seems like a pretty enthusiastic crowd who wants to do things to beat Trump. If our nominee makes their selection and most of us aren't yes, I'm pumped about that, that's a missed opportunity. And the good news is there's so many people who can fit the ready to do the job and bring excitement. And last thing I said is maybe there's a reason I can't divine. But I can't think of a single reason why this wouldn't be a woman. So, I think the only way it wouldn't be is I talked to 10 finalists, and 8 were women, and I just didn't see myself getting along with any of them. It was only the guy, and even then I wouldn't do that. But it certainly can't be a white dude, okay? So, this would be, it would raise big questions for me about that, just understanding that. So hopefully it's somebody that we're yes, they can do the job, and yes, I'm excited about them. And they will be an asset on the campaign trail. Don't overstate the asset. Their main thing is to do well in that one vice presidential debate and give a good speech at the convention. because they're kind of off Broadway the rest of the time. And that's the main thing. And then be like a source of wisdom and execution. And we'll see. Listen, I don't think this is going to happen. So, I mean, Trump has clearly set Pence up to be the fall guy. But I've always thought all along, just because he loves the spotlight, even if Mike Pence and he were the closest friends in human history, you could see him dumping Pence because he wants 3 days of dominating the news. And then here comes Nikki Haley. So Mike Pence would certainly have a food tester, but this is, particularly if, and again, none of us hope anything bad happens to health or economy, but if things go worse or Trump's just judged not to be handling it well, he'll get more desperate. And we know he's like a carnival barker in that way.
I just want to say that, first of all, my parents are Holocaust survivors, both of them. And what scares me more than the second term of Trump is if he refuses to leave after that, because he's joked about more terms than that, and his son's following him, and that to me is what's really, really frightening. So, have you heard about, I think I've heard him joke about that, and I've also heard, for what it's worth, that Melania used to say he used to sleep with a copy of Mein Kampf next to his bedside. And I've heard that, but I don't know if that's true. But that's what gets me.
Well, for the most part, he's joked about it, but he also, there's this Time, I didn't even know Time magazine was all around. Sorry, that's not a shot at Time. But apparently there's a Time magazine cover that shows, Trump campaign signs, 2024, 2028. He's retweeted that 3 times, right? And listen, what's clear is he sees this as the White House is his house, not our house. Air Force One is his plane. The Situation Room is his command center to foul up. He really sees it. His idols in the world are all autocrats. It's what he desires. So I'd say let's beat him by enough that that's not an issue. And I even say, I just want to beat him, so I take any scenario. The nightmare scenario is you guys do what you need to do here. And your brothers and sisters to your northwest do it in Michigan. But we don't get Wisconsin back, and we don't get North Carolina, and we don't get Florida. And as you know from the Senate race in 2018, Arizona takes weeks to count the vote. And what if Arizona's tied, basically, and we're counting votes? That's going to be so disastrous for the country. So again, I would take that rather than losing, but let's win early. I'm not worried. Maybe I should be worried about that. Because every time we think the aiders and abettors can't get any weaker, they do. I think we need to stay watchful. And again, that's where that sounds crazy. When you ask that question, I think probably even to some people in this room, it sounds crazy. But, Mitch McConnell's going to, guard the hen house? Kevin McCarthy? Brett Kavanaugh? So, and people ask, what if you are in an Arizona situation and the votes get challenged? I do think Roberts would do the right thing, right? But I'm not super confident about that. But if that court goes 7-2, I think all bets are off. So it's not crazy. Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here.
Of course.
As we head towards the general election season, how significant of a role will the candidate's policy platform play in swaying voter attitudes?
Well, I will say this. A presidential election, based on my history and research, it is a very personal decision. Do I want this person on my phone and in my life? By the way, that should work to our advantage this time. Is it somebody that I think will fight for people like me? So that sentiment is more important than the policy underlining it. And so policy is important. So you think about some of the swing voters. Most people that are going to decide this election that are truly swing voters in Pennsylvania, they don't know the full extent that the tax cuts went to the wealthy. You say, how could that be? Understand, people who are going to decide this election are not consuming political news. It's always striking to me when you share with them content or ask them questions, I didn't know that. I will tell you, I've seen some research recently with voters who, most of them in a focus group, knew that the tax cuts went to the wealthy. But they said, well, I don't like that, but all the tax cuts for companies created jobs. And when they were exposed to the data and infographics that said not, they got really upset. So never underestimate how little information the foundation is. We can't skip to the 3rd chapter. So certainly policy standpoint in terms of prosecuting Trump is super important. I think our nominee has to have some remedies, that are interesting to people, but just as important is just that sense of advocacy. I'll give you when Obama won re-election, and he won re-election thanks to your help with the highest unemployment rate any president ever won re-election in. It really came down to that. And voters said, I don't blame him for it, but the economy's not great. I don't like that Wall Street people aren't in jail. Stock market doesn't really matter to many swing voters, so that wasn't, like, we didn't even talk about the stock market going up in a re-elect because it didn't help us. Think about that. But there was just a sense that he gets me. He gets me. The auto industry rescue helped for that, even for people who weren't in the industry. So you've got to get, the good news is I think Bernie and Biden both have that sense of advocacy and connection with working people. So that's good in a way. I think, you know, sadly, Hillary, despite being someone who's always most effective when she was out there like fighting for nurses and teachers, she didn't win that debate against Trump. So that's the debate we have to win at Trump. Basically, if you have 10 swing voters here, let's say blue-collar voters in Scranton, and if at least 6 or 7 of them aren't saying simple, when push comes to shove, who's going to fight harder for you and your family? And they don't say our nominee, we're not going to win the election. And some of that's policy, but a lot of it is just that the language you use, the advocacy you use. And by the way, if Biden's our nominee, I actually think his stock is underappreciated right now for the following reasons. One is, for some voters, he is a safe alternative. Now, we can wish that wasn't how people make their decision, but I can live with him, number one. Number two, Mayor Pete was probably the biggest contrast with Trump in terms of generation. But Biden's empathy and goodness and personal tragedy, it's just, and a lot of voters don't even know that. Because he never ran for, I mean, he was the VP. We didn't run biography ads about Joe Biden. So he's still got to introduce himself to America. And three, I think because he sometimes doesn't use, you know, political talking points or language and can mangle stuff up, that's good, man. I would just own that. So, you know I don't talk like all those senators in Washington, but, you know, I've never lost to Scranton. Like, it's good, man. I would just own it. It's one of Trump's strengths. So I think he's got some underappreciated assets. So policies like one side of the coin, but just that gut sense is super important. But if we don't do a good job of really educating voters about, because here's the thing, in Pennsylvania today and in Wisconsin and in Michigan, in many counties, we are statistically and technically already in a manufacturing recession. And Trump is not nearly paying the price for that. We have to lay all this at his feet. And let's hope we don't go into a recession because of what's happening. But if we do, we know what he's going to say. Not my fault. Not my fault. Well, I've learned working in that White House, everything's the president's fault, okay? And we need to lay everything at his feet, which is, well, biggest deficit of all time, that was a problem. The big tax cuts, manufacturing recessions, your trade war, it made the economy all weak, so it couldn't withstand a shock. So we have to put this at his feet. This has to be his problem. And so it's a great question. But I think sometimes those of us that love politics, spend time on social media, really read the New York Times, we can be a problem, though I know I can be, where we focus too much on the policy. Policy is important, but it is very much like trust and character and a sense of advocacy. And, you know, that's why Trump's president. I mean, it was the biggest fraudulent act in American history, really. The bill of goods he sold the American people, that this guy was going to fight for the forgotten working person. But he won that debate.
I'd like to hear, do you have any thoughts about if Biden becomes the nominee, how you're going to bring in all those young people that are on Bernie's side?
Well, it's just going to take a lot of work on all of us. So if we know Bernie people, as I said, we should tell them we want them to be involved. We should listen to them. Bernie's got a role to play. But I think the most important role is all of us out in the states who know people and making sure we understand, we value them, and we understand what they believe in, and we can't get rid of Trump without them. And then, you know, hopefully Biden, the other thing I'd say about Biden is he hasn't executed this so far. The other thing he's got that I think is underappreciated, you know, kind of the Uncle Joe, the aviators, like, this guy could be a great, like, GIF and meme machine. Like, you know, I really do, right? And so I hope Biden and his campaign don't play overly tight. Like, let's do well in debates. That would be good. But, like, the other part of it, like, have some fun with it. Have some fun with who you are, right? You know that photo of him in the Corvette with the aviators, like, winking? Like, let's have more of that, you know? And then I do think, I don't want to overstate this, but I think I think younger celebrities, by the way, people I don't know, YouTube influencers, Instagram influencers, all these people, there has to be a real effort to get them involved. And again, I guess climate will be the best way to say, hey, he's the guy that gives us the last chance to do this. That's probably where the most energy can be. But it's going to be a challenge. Like so of all the things that keep me up at night, and a lot does, if I had to identify the thing that worries me the most, and I would say this even if Bernie wasn't running, it is, are we going to get strong enough young turnout? And then are we going to make sure that as few of them as possible vote third party? We saw our old friend Jill Stein now has tweeted about Joe Biden like 27 times in the last 24 hours. I'm not kidding. So that's all going to come back again.
Thank you. So much of the dysfunction in the country is related to the Senate. So that, you can imagine if the Senate is as it is today, even with a Democratic president, how might we function? Is there a chance that we can flip the Senate? And is there anything we can do to help that process?
Right. It's essential. So it wasn't too long ago the Democratic Party had senators in the Dakotas, in Louisiana, other parts of the South, Nebraska. Those days are gone. I hope not. They're not gone permanently. But until we get more competitive in more places in the country, our ceiling is probably 54, 55. So that means if everything went right in three straight Senate cycles. So what does that mean? We don't have a Senate race to lose. We have to capitalize on every single opportunity. So this year, that means obviously Arizona, Mark Kelly. It means in Colorado, Hickenlooper, Montana, Steve Bullock just announced he's running for governor, the former mayor of Montana, or governor, great. Obviously, of course, Maine. Maybe Kentucky, maybe Iowa. And North Carolina, so that's what's interesting, by the way. So North Carolina and Arizona, you should view them as kind of like your siblings, right? You all have a role in the Electoral College. But then those two also have must-win Senate races. We've got to win them all. Another thing I'd say is, so both Biden and Sanders have said they aren't going to get rid of the filibuster. Whoever wins better change their view on that. And I don't send that lightly, but things have changed, and why should we play? It's almost like when McConnell does anything, it's like, well, that's Mitch McConnell, that's what he does. And if we do anything at all aggressive, David Brooks write a column and our friends in Washington get all upset. We should not worry about the New York Times editorial columnists for a long time. And if we get the Senate back, we got to cash a lot of checks. So I'm going to embarrass my son because he said I shouldn't say this word because I'm too old to say it, but we do need to operate a little more gangster, okay? So before we get to healthcare policy and taxes even, there's a bunch of structural things we need to do. Get rid of the filibuster. Let's make D.C. a state and Puerto Rico a state on day 2. I'm tired of playing by different rules, okay? And that makes me sad because I believe in, I believe in fair play and the order of things, but we are playing by completely separate rules in these, and we see it on the deficit. So here it is again. I guarantee if we win back the White House, Mitch McConnell, who's now been part 3 different times of blowing up massive deficits under Republican presidents, is just going to be we're not going to do anything with you unless you cut domestic spending in Social Security and Medicare. So you can only be Lucy with the football too many times. So I think we have to be willing to do aggressive things, which not everybody will like. But we're not doing them just to be aggressive. We're doing them to help people. And there's so many things that we will not be able to help as many people as we need to without being a little more aggressive. Same thing on voting. So it's great you guys have early voting here. Another reason we have to win more states back legislatively and governors is so we can reform voting systems. So every state where Democrats control enough of the machinery to get through, it's not complicated. All the things you can do to make it easier to register and to participate. But the other thing we have to do, the long lines on Super Tuesday weren't just in Texas. They were in blue states too. Completely unforgivable. So we have to make sure the election day experience is also painless. We can get a car and food and anything we want in 30 seconds these days. The one thing that's a real pain in the butt to do is vote. And it's the thing that should be the easiest. So that's the other thing we need to demand of our elected officials is when we have an opportunity to make it easier to vote, register, early vote, and the actual election day, put pressure on them. Because of all the public policy issues in the world and in the country, some of them are super complex. We don't know the answer for. Figuring out how to execute a good election day is not one of them. It's simple second-grade math. It's just supply and demand and positioning your assets properly. Yeah, but we have to win the Senate back. And I do think, sadly, we're in a place where we can't blow Senate races. And in 2022, you have an opportunity here, obviously, with Toomey's seat. We have Johnson in Wisconsin, so it was all the races we thought we were going to win in 16. But I will say, so you guys are going to get it done. I don't mean to depress you, but if we win the White House back, we see what usually happens is we win, and we say we're going to do all these things, and voters are like, yeah, and then we try to do them, and they're like, wait, you're actually going to do this? And sometimes we can pay a price for that, right? And so it means that the good Senate map in 22, I hope we win them all, but there's a chance if we win in 20, it gets a little more complicated. So that makes it more necessary that this crew this time, we've at least got to win those core four. And then, Iowa and Kentucky are, stretches. But we have to win those core four. And you guys obviously can all contribute. I'd like you to stay here and help beat Trump, but if you want to go volunteer in a Senate race, make sure you do that. But that's critical. And the good news is the polling, again, we should not be careful about polling. It's pretty good in a lot of those races. But I would just caution you, when it says 47-43, that's not 51-48. So, my guess is some of those Republican incumbents in particular, it's more tied than not. And so that's where, again, the presidential campaign, can Mark Kelly in Arizona or Cal Cunningham in North Carolina win if our nominee doesn't win? Yeah, they can. Can they win if our nominee loses by more than 2.5 points? Probably not. So, we've got to do as well as we can everywhere. And like that 2nd District of Maine is super important. Trump won it last time, even though Hillary won the state. We need a nominee who can do better up in the northern part of Maine than Hillary did, so that, Collins faces more headwinds up there.
In 2000, George W. won partly because of the existence of a third-party candidate.
Yes.
Same thing happened in 2016.
Right.
I'm very disturbed by the continued presence of Tulsi Gabbard, who has no chance of being nominated. I see a stalking horse there. I mean, I see that she could be a spoiler. What do you think?
So this is a really important question. By the way, Nader's at it again, too, criticizing Biden. And so, what really gets me about that? So I was just in Florida, too. So that's the best place. When you're in Florida, it's the best place to talk about the power of individual effort. Because most people in Florida, 5 or 6 of them say if the 5 or 6 of us worked harder, we probably could have figured out 538 votes. So it's the power of that. And of course, we know what came after. We didn't do anything about climate change for 8 years. Maybe chief reason the planet's on the path it's on. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis died, over 4,000 Americans. But those at their core were not foreign policy decisions or domestic policy decisions. They were electoral decisions. We've got to remind people that sometimes these things can be disconnected from elections, but everything this country's ever done or didn't do, local or federal, flows from who we elect. And particularly with young people sometimes, that's a good conversation, so they just remember, like, everything. I mean, the Civil War flowed through the 1860 election. So I'll tell you, in 2012, when we were going to have a really tough election, we were maniacally obsessed with the third-party vote. We did everything we did to keep those numbers down. There will be third-party people, the Libertarian candidate, the Green Party. So our goal is to run a strong enough campaign, and all of you have a role to do, because you are, I guarantee you, every single one of us in this auditorium is going to talk to somebody who's thinking about voting third party. And we just have to, first of all, listen to them. Don't speak. Like, what do you care about? Why are you doing that? But if they don't like Trump, we just have to focus the mind. The only way to get rid of this guy. But we got to keep it like under 2%. Tulsi concerns me. Now, she has said very clearly many times she's not going to do this, because she would be a compelling third-party candidate to get 3 or 4 as opposed to 2. So it's a problem. So our nominee better be, they're thinking about, how do I put together Pennsylvania and Wisconsin? It can't just be me and Trump. And by the way, that's like, some of that you're going to have to advertise to people that you think are third-party flight risk. We did that in 12. So you've got to be on it. So there's going to be people on those ballot lines. And the Trump campaign is very focused on this. It's just as important for them to get somebody to vote third party as it is to get them to vote for Trump. And they know there's a lot of them. These guys are going to be all over this. And their data game is top notch. I wouldn't be surprised if they already know the, 200, 1,000 people potentially in Pennsylvania that they want to kind of communicate with on third party. And what are they going to do? You know, they're going to run ads of young people saying Joe Biden doesn't believe in climate change. Joe Biden, is anti-immigrant. You say, what? They'll do it. You know they're going to do it. That's kind of where they're going to play, so it makes it harder. So I'm concerned about this super generally, and then you specifically get to Tulsi. So I hope she keeps getting asked about this every day, because there's now a record. She's answered it 20 times or so. But it's a big concern. And keep that in mind here. If somebody says, I'm thinking third party, that is as serious a threat of someone voting Trump. It just is. And, think about it. 48-2 in Pennsylvania, 47-8 in Michigan, 47-2 in Wisconsin. That was Trump's win numbers. Those were his win numbers. He won nationally 46-1. So, third parties were a big part of that. And what happened at the end of the race, according to data, is the third party group of voters who were considering voting third party was larger than it was. And the people who kind of more look like Trump voters who were thinking third party came home to him. And the Hillary people stuck on third party. And, there's some things the campaign clearly could have done, for sure. There's no doubt the Russians had an impact there. But you see what Stein's doing. I think she's probably operating on orders she's getting from Moscow, would be my guess.
Thank you. Could you speak to the reports that MI6 former employees in Blackwater, the leader of Blackwater, are operating in some sort of spy capacity on behalf of the Trump's organization? Does that affect us locally, or is that just something that you believe? Do you believe it? And number two, is that just on the national level, or something we would see in grassroots organizing?
Yeah. So for those that didn't see it, Eric Prince of Blackwater fame, is it brother-in-law of Betsy DeVos? I think. What a family, by the way. Has been part of something with Project Veritas with this James O'Keefe character to plant operatives, former intelligence operatives, in the Democratic campaigns to spy. So I would say this, am I worried about it? Not on scale, but it should just be another example. If we think there's a set of things that they wouldn't do to make sure Trump wins, they're going to do them. They're going to do all of them. I mean, you're going to be faced here in Pennsylvania with voters being called saying, Election day equipment's broken, you can't vote till 11, okay? Or actually, the Pennsylvania law for early vote, they've decided now in Harrisburg it's not going to take place till 2022. And so, we got, but this is where we all come in. We just got to be on people. If you know your people and you know who you got to be responsible for, you'll be on them. But that's what we're going to be faced with, for sure. And so I'm not worried about that on scale, but, this is where they're going to go. This is where they're going to go. I'd be more worried about data breaches in campaigns, where they're monkeying with our information. Obviously, we're all concerned about elections that are, and that's a governmental responsibility. But I do worry about infiltrations into campaigns to really pollute data. So think about all the work you guys do. You talk to 7 voters, that all gets recorded, what they cared about, which way they're leaning, and that sort of thing would worry me if there was a compromise on that. Imagine if all that got erased, all the work that gets left. So, the DNC and the parties are spending a lot of money on that. They've got the best experts in the world. But it just is a reminder about what we're up against here, right? And I know that it all can be when you hear all this, what they're going to do, the lows they're going to sink to, the money they have, how obsessed Trump is with being elected, it can cow you a little bit, right? But anytime this country or other heroic people around the world have faced down, tyranny and oppression and have fought for our better angels, it's kind of been a David v. Goliath situation. Now, the good news, it's not like we don't have the voters to win, so that's a pretty good situation to be in. We do have that. But, we have no option but to be kind of the freedom fighters here and do everything we can in our power to bring about the result we're looking for. And we can do it. And you guys are core. You are the first territory we have to take back from Trump land. These 20 have to go blue. I'd love it by 10 or 10:30 Eastern time, but at some point on November 3rd. And then again, hopefully the Wolverine state will follow. And then we've got 3 or 4. And that's why it's super important, whether it's Biden or Sanders, we have to have multiple states in play. If we're to the point where it's October 15th, and we're it's all down in Wisconsin, that's super scary. We saw that movie in 2000, and we saw that movie in 2004. And Arizona, North Carolina, maybe Florida, maybe Georgia, and those are big states, have to be in play. The great thing about those states, by the way, you guys have some play here with turnout in Philly and suburban turnout and vote share. So you have some elasticity. Wisconsin has a little less, which is why which is why it's going to be harder, I think, than Pennsylvania, Michigan. But North Carolina and Georgia and Arizona, we just have a lot of people that we haven't registered or that are not regular voters, or people who are moving into those states who are more liberal and progressive. So it's really interesting because it's clay that you can mold, but it takes an enormous amount of work. The good news is there's a lot of energy there. But I'd be super bummed out if we're not 2 weeks out. And, this state's close, but, you guys might have a small edge, and same in Wisconsin. I'd love to see that in Wisconsin, but we need Arizona and North Carolina. If Arizona and North Carolina are close heading into Election Day, I like our chances, just because I think we have the ability to really do some interesting things there on turnout. So anyway, you guys are all great to be here. Let's hope we get through everything we're going through as a country, and let's go win.